All right, hello everybody and welcome to Smarking Out, our web series here. This is our first episode, and boy, I can't be more excited than to launch it off with one of the biggest superstars of all time in the world of professional wrestling and the world, I'm going to say, is Mr. Hillbilly Jim, and we're looking at him here, and he's joining us live in this recording from Kentucky, and I can't thank you enough, Mr. Jim, for being here with us today.
Well, listen, man, it's my pleasure, and I got to tell you, when you contacted me about doing this, I really love the name of the show, Smarking Out. Well, we could talk about that for an hour in itself.
And we just might. Actually, this is one of my questions, which is going to be good. I want to just start out and just let everybody know that if they're watching now and you're not part of the Smarking Out online Facebook group, that's where we're going to be sharing all this and everybody can see. But we'll have so much information for everybody. Just want to know if they're not part of the group. This is the kind of thing we're going to do and connect the fans with people, our favorite superstars. And I've got, and I'll just show you my notes here real quick, but we've got tons of questions from the fans. We'll try to get to as many as we can. And like I told you, let me start out with you. Why don't we just go through and just get an idea? One of the biggest questions we had was, how does Hillbilly Jim become Hillbilly Jim? What's the gimmick? What's the character? How did you become Hillbilly Jim? Is this you? Is this a character? What was it? Tell us, kind of take us back to the 70s and the 80s.
Well, I can tell you, from a young guy watching wrestling growing up, I've always been like everybody else, especially in the South. We're big wrestling fans, but it used to just be something, Evan, that used to just come on maybe once or twice on the weekend. And basically it was on some little 30-minute show somewhere, maybe out of Nashville, Tennessee, or maybe they would do something out of Louisville. And it was a very small kind of a market, and only certain people would watch it. But I always enjoyed watching wrestling, just like I think everybody from every era does. And I'd always watch on the weekends, on Saturdays or Sundays, that 30-minute show. And I couldn't wait till the next weekend to watch it again. And so I noticed wrestling started to evolve. And it got to where it was, instead of just looking like guys that were up in the ring, like guys next door mowing the yard, there were more athletic looking guys. And I remember watching it as a kid and watching these guys, and I realized this is quite an interesting thing that's played out here. And then I started becoming into kind of a mark for that Channel 17 wrestling out of Atlanta. That was with Gordon Soley was the announcer down there. It was Georgia Championship Wrestling, because we started getting cable TV, and I noticed the caliber of athlete was more like something that I enjoyed, because they had like a young Jimmy Superfly Snuka on there, and you'd see guys like young Paul Orndorff and guys that really had physiques, and then you'd have big, tough-looking guys, and the show was better. So that's kind of what got me really into the business and liking it. Now, if I could have put in for another gimmick, I might have put in for a Ric Flair gimmick. Woo! As it turned out, I got a Hillbilly Jim gimmick, and and it wasn't no real stretch for me, Evan, because I actually am really from here in Kentucky, born and raised here. And although I don't really think I'm straight up a hillbilly, I know hillbillies. I know people that really are hillbillies. So it wasn't a hard stretch for me to figure out what to do about this Hillbilly Jim character. And I knew it had to be something that was big and over animated, and something that was just really in your face. And it had to be exaggerated, because after all, that's what wrestling is in the ring. Because when you have a match, you got to play to the person in the 80th row as well as to the guy sitting right beside ringside. So it's a big, demonstrative type of business, and we like to see the guys in the ring be bigger than life. So that's what I was lucky enough to become a part of.
Yeah, let me ask a question, because I don't think people really know your size, and I mean this in the nicest and the best possible way. You're 6'7". What I always thought was amazing about wrestling was we'd see these guys in the ring, and they look normal, but you'd see them in person, and I'm 6 feet, but you see them in person, I'm 6'1", but they're monster, towering over everybody. And today the business has kind of changed a little bit. People aren't like that. Back then, I mean, you and Hulk Hogan, all these guys, I mean, was there an issue if a guy was a little smaller, even like Randy Savage?
That's a great point, because I got to tell you something, and I've spoke to some of my friends, and we've talked about that. There was a time the WWF, as it was called, was considered a big man's territory. They didn't have little guys in there. The little guys were just guys they'd chop up, like the Road Warriors. You know how the Road Warriors get in there on one of those TV matches in 40 seconds, they demolish some people. Right. Well, because you look at the WWF was a big man's territory. Because when I was there were people like the Ugandan giant Kamala. Big John Studd, King Kong Bundy, Blackjack Mulligan, the One Man Gang, Andre the Giant, Hillbilly Jims. All of us were well over 300 pounds, and some of us were north of 6'5", heading towards 7 or 7'2" or 7'3". And our deal was nobody of a certain size could touch us. So that's the reason why when the guy was real big and huge, you got in that ring and you didn't put the other guy over. And now I notice, excuse me, it's changed a lot. They have these cruiserweight divisions and smaller guys, and they brought more smaller people into the business. Now I think the guys are great athletes, and I think they put on good shows. But there was a time when that would not happen. You wouldn't see a world champion be a little guy. He'd be some strong guy that looked like he could handle himself, not only in the ring, but if he was next door in the bar somewhere. And that's the way the business used to be. But it's changed dramatically since then.
What do you think the reason is that changed? Is it a lack of big guys, or do you think it's an acceptance, or what do you think it is?
Well, I really believe that wrestling kind of goes along and it kind of monitors what's happening in our society. And I do believe that since, they kind of got into this superhero type thing, and a lot of those guys are like the little Rey Mysterio type guys who are very little and small. And then you had guys like Bob Holly who could really wrestle, but they weren't big guys. And I think that the business kind of wanted to lend itself to whatever was happening and reflect in society, what was going on in society. And I think they realized there was a market for some smaller guys, because there's always been junior weight classes and lighter weight classes. There used to be old time wrestlers like Les Phillips and guys like that, and great guys from England and Charles and all those guys that were coming. They weren't big men, but they were like welterweight pro wrestlers. That wasn't usually accepted that much in American pro wrestling. But I think that they saw a chance that they could bring in some smaller guys like that. And I get it. I understand that. And it's part of the show. It's an endeavor to have something for every member of your family if they're 9 years old or 96 years old.
Right. Absolutely. I want to get back to the gimmick of Hillbilly Jim and how we got there, but I want to ask you something real quick before we even jump into all that, which is, look, I'm a product of the 80s. That was my childhood, was the 80s, and that's when this blew up. It was Michael Jackson, it was Hulk Hogan, and all you guys and everything. Back then, like you said, we didn't even have cable TV. We're lucky if you had cable TV back then. And so what I want to just ask about is real quick, and maybe you could just reflect on it, which is, I think, we get a lot of people talking about the word superstar. Some people laugh at that. Some people mock it. But I think Vince McMahon and the WWE and WWF really owned that word. They owned the word superstar. Did you feel any sort of pressure or feeling? What do you think of that word superstar, and how do you feel about it today?
I have no beef against the word in itself, but I think it's overused just a little bit. And I'll tell you why. You remember we used to have a show that came on there we called Superstars of Wrestling. Sure. That was one show. We would have shows like that, and we do Monday Night Raw, and we do the Saturday Night's Main Event, stuff like that. So that was the first time they started using the word superstar, and I kind of got it. And then they would refer to us in some of our merchandising as Superstars of Wrestling. But the word during the 80s wasn't used very much in the dressing room around us guys. Now, that became more a office mandate from the WWE. And they make all of their people, anything they do, refer to the WWE superstars. They don't call them wrestlers. They call them WWE superstars. And I get it, what they're trying to go with it, and the saturation part did work. What they wanted to accomplish, they got it in everybody's mind, and they made it something that everybody thought of WWE when they thought of superstars, because that's what they want to do. But for me, I think it's overused a little bit too much. I like when you watch the news and they start using the word narrative. What's the narrative? I get tired of hearing the damn word narrative. Right. Boom, let me shoot myself. So it's too much, and most of us old guys, we laugh at the older guys because those guys in the 2000s, they were kind of used to that superstars thing, because that's what it. And I think you get the guys and you get most of the boys and you talk to them individually, they feel a little bit put off about being called superstars. But I see where they want to do with it, and like everything else that the company did, if they decide they want to do it and they put their efforts to it, usually, Evan, it works. And that company in Connecticut knows the wrestling business, and they know what people like, and they follow trends, and they follow all sorts of things that are happening around the country, and they pretty much have their hands on the pulse of everything. So if they decide to go with the word superstar, they're going to go with it. And
That's right.
People like it now. So I like the word better when it wasn't used so much. Let me just put it that way.
Sure. No, I totally understand. Let's swing back then to, I want to touch on two things. One is the gimmick. When you talk about Hillbilly Jim, was that a WWE assignment that you were going to be Hillbilly Jim? Or was there more sort of freedom in the old days where you were building this character through time and then you were recognized by WWE? You see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. Back in those days, Evan, everybody began in different territories. Like worked in different territories. Like people don't realize, but I broke in Kentucky for a guy who passed away about a year ago named Dale Mann, who has an independent little wrestling promoter. And he's the one that kind of gave me my start and let me get my feet wet. And I stayed there for a little while. And then I went to Calgary, Canada. I wrestled in Stampede Wrestling for Stu Hart. As a matter of fact, one of my best friends in the whole entire wrestling business is Bruce Hart of the Hart family. I used to go up and see Helen and Stu at the house up there, and I knew all the brothers and everything. And even though I didn't stay long, I did a character right there like I was a oil field worker, because oil rig worker, because in Alberta that was big. Those oil workers, they were a rough lot, and so that's kind of what they brought me in at. And then after my tenure there, I came south back down, and I got my foot in the door, so to speak, with the AWA down in Memphis, and I became a character called Harley Davidson. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Harley Davidson, to be honest with you, I look like a motorcycle guy, but hell, I'm scared of motorcycles. I've never been on a motorcycle in my life, because everybody I ever seen on a motorcycle is either wound up dead or with some sort of a limb missing or a brain injury. And so, but I had a chance to become Harley Davidson, and which was a baby-faced character, myself and a guy named Roger Smith. They gave him the name of Dirty Rhodes, kind of like Dusty Rhodes. So it was Harley Davidson and Dirty Rhodes. And that got over. And then when that finished, luckily I didn't get any national exposure over that, because when I got my chance to come to the WWF at that time, I was like a fresh guy. But I'd already had my feet wet, so to speak, from wrestling business, and got some matches under my belt, and was able to travel some different territories and kind of understand what was going on. And I was smart to business on what to do. And so when I got the chance to come to work for them, of course they couldn't merchandise me, Evan, as Harley Davidson.
Right.
Try that. That's going to work. So I remember one night in New Haven, Connecticut, they flew me up. They wanted to watch me wrestle. I put on my Harley Davidson gear, and I went out there and wrestled with a guy named, you'll remember this guy, Salvatore Bellomo. Great guy. They had me to go through a match with him. And then the powers that were in the WWF at that time got me back in the dressing room. Vince McMahon was there. The late, great Chief Jay Strongbow was there. The late George Scott was there, and myself. And they were going through this ideal. What are we going to call this guy? What's he going to be? You can't do Harley Davidson. You can't merchandise Harley Davidson. It's a lawsuit. And Chief Jay Strongbow, God rest his soul, he said, he said, there hadn't been a hillbilly in a long time. And he was a bit more Indian than I am. He was an Italian guy from Bronx, right? But let me tell you, he knew the wrestling business. And Chief Jay said there has not been a hillbilly wrestler. He was thinking about the scuffling hillbillies. He was thinking about Haystacks Calhoun, some of those old-time hillbilly type characters. And Vince McMahon says, oh, I kind of like it. He said, what do you think? Vince McMahon said, yeah, Hillbilly Jim. So that's where my name began. And then of course, Vince and George Scott, who was our booker, who's got booked me one time 63 straight nights. I wrestled 63 nights. That's another story. But anyway, there's a lot of guys that did that. I think Hercules Hernandez did 100 something one time, so I really can't complain. But they said, well, okay, you're going to be Hillbilly Jim. That'd be good. And Vince asked me, he said, well, where are you going to say you're from? Well, of course, I'm from Kentucky. Mm-hmm. Raised around here. And I remember when I was a child, I'd go over and visit my relatives over in a county called Barron County, which was Glasgow was the big city. And every once in a while, they'd take us up to a little town called Tompkinsville. And as we would head to Tompkinsville, Kentucky in Monroe County, we passed by a little town called Mud Lick, Kentucky. I said, oh, it's the greatest thing I ever heard. Mud Lick, Kentucky. Oh, I love it. That's great. So when he asked me, where are you going to say you're from? I said, Mud Lick, Kentucky. Vince says, oh, I like that. And that was really how that whole thing happened. And it happened in real time in a matter of 30, 40 minutes of us talking in the dressing room. And then I started the whole thing in the WWF where I would show up at the events. Mm-hmm. And I would watch Hulk Hogan's matches, and they mysteriously, Gorilla Monsoon and Lord Alfred Hayes, there's that big hillbilly guy. Well, he follows the WWF around, and, I'd be in London, Ontario, and I'd be in Toronto to Maple Leaf Gardens, and I'd be in Philadelphia, and I'd be in Boston, and all of a sudden I'd show up in Madison Square Garden. And that's how they brought me in nice and slow until that night in Poughkeepsie, New York, when Big John Studd and Ken Patera and Bobby Heenan were going to cut Hulk Hogan's hair. Mm-hmm. Jumped up and did the save on Hogan, and that's how my career started.
What I mean, when I think about it now, and you think about when you think about it now, I'm thinking about it now. To be brought in as Hulk Hogan's sort of, I mean, I remember there was nothing greater as a kid than watching a guy in the audience get a chance to get in the ring with the pros. We thought it was real. So, that gimmick is brilliant. What did it feel like to you're becoming Hulk Hogan's guy where he's going to give you the boots and train you and all this kind of stuff? I mean, at the time, did you know that was going to explode? Or did you guys were you just writing the story as it went?
Well, let me tell you. You're talking about that brush against Hulk Hogan. I'll put that in somewhere. That'd be like the equivalent of Bill Gates deciding he's going to take you into his fold and show you how to do business. Because Hulk Hogan was over, speaking of smarking out, Hulk Hogan was over. He was the most over wrestler in the world. Everyone knew who Hulk Hogan was. And the WWF provided the vehicle, and Hulk Hogan was driving it. So when you get brushed against Hulk Hogan, it hits the seal of approval. So when we did all those vignettes where we'd film all those things of him training me and all those little things, and then they'd show me at him at my first match in Madison Square Garden and all those things. And we took a long time and we set it up kind of like a fine meal. You can't cook a fine meal in a minute. It took weeks and months for them to set it up and stir all these ingredients. And that way, when I came out, I was hot already. And so I realized I could have not had a better opportunity. And to be in the right place at the right time and to have your foot in the door is one thing. But to get the seal of approval from the top guy in the business, we knew it was a big deal. And it was all calculated. I mean, a lot of these things they were developing as it went on, but they had an ideal of what they wanted to do and where they wanted to go with the Hillbilly Jim character. So I just followed the deal. And the wrestling business at that time too, Evan, was on fire. And it just started to captivate the whole world. I told you one day we were talking that my friend Jimmy Hart, Mouth of South Jimmy Hart, he said something that I can't take credit for. He said, Jim, us guys that came up in the 80s somehow or another got woven into the fabric of America. And we did, because you still remember us today. There's been legions of guys that came after us, and they don't have the same effect. But you take that core of guys, the Iron Sheik, Nikolai Volkov, Hillbilly Jim, Junkyard Dog, Rowdy Roddy Piper, Big John Studd, Captain Lou Albano, Classy Freddie Blassie, the guys that were there, early guys in that 80s, we were the ones that people seem to still gravitate to. So, like I said before, we're just blessed that we came along the right time.
Yeah, I mean, I want to follow up on two things. One is, I mean, did you ever think back then that it would be as big as it ever got? I mean, bigger than movie stars, bigger than rock stars, or as big. Did you think that was it, or did you think I'm going to go wrestle around the world? I don't know. What did you think? I mean, did you ever think it would be like it is today?
At that time, it was so overwhelming to all of us guys, because we were on the run so much and we were doing so much and we were traveling so much and we were booked every night, and we knew it was something big going on. But I think the one thing that really got it for me was when we did the WrestleMania 3 at the Pontiac Silverdome. We had the world record crowd. I remember Vince was back there, and we were watching, getting ready to watch the main event, Hogan and Andre. Mm-hmm, yeah. And where they were going to switch a belt with Hogan, and he was going to slam Andre, big. And it already been just like, it was almost 94,000 people there indoor. So the guys, we had to get there like 2 hours before the event because of so many people there. And we had to stay like 3 hours after the event was over before we could even leave because it was that many people trying to get out of that Pontiac, Michigan, which was, smaller roads, a bad deal. Vince got us all in there, and we were standing there looking down the tunnel at this crowd. And Vince said to us, and I'll never forget this, Vince says, guys, y'all look at this, what's going on here. He said, because you might not never see this again. And I knew right then we were doing something big because Vince, who had this, he was like the omnipotent Oz, always creating stuff in his mind. That's all he thought about was business. If he was that involved in it, I knew it was something that was really big. And then one time after that, the great country music singer George Jones, who's probably the greatest country music. I was doing Farm Aid for Willie Nelson. And a guy brought me up to introduce me to George Jones. He said, I want you to meet George. And I went and shook George's on. I said, George, this is Hillbilly Jim. He said, oh, I know who you are. I watch you every week on TV. I said, Lord, George Jones is watching me. I couldn't wait to call my mother and tell her because he was like the main guy in country music. So we knew we were laying some ground that had not been explored before, had been walked on before, and we knew that we were in places where people hadn't been there before. But you don't know, Evan, how long this is. You don't know what's going to last. Now, we didn't really think Vince was one of the only guys that believed that those first WrestleManias would go on and on. And now it's become a brand like Super Bowl.
Right. It's big, if anything. I mean, that's just
yeah. So there was a lot of things that we were doing that were that the merchandising was a big deal, and to be immortalized in a little rubber statue was pretty doggone cool, and have all these different things that they were creating on us, and people actually having them and buying them and coming up to you, and I could tell it was a big buzz. But not only was it a big buzz in my little hometown when I'd come back home, but wherever we went, people treated us great. I mean, it was so strong because our TV was so powerful that there was one time when we would do 3 crews across America. The WWF would do. We would have an East Coast crew. We'd have one for the middle of America. We'd have one on the left coast, which would be out in California. And they would book shows every night across America. And we had such a roster with enough of, I guess you want to call them superstars now, of great guys that we could put great guys in main events on tops and they'd sell out everywhere. Of course, the ones that Hogan was on was the one you really wanted to be on because at that time he was just on fire. And that was an absolute guaranteed sellout if you were on Hogan's cards. Yeah. So we knew we were doing some things that had never been done before. And it was just, while you're on that ride, you don't have a chance to collect your thoughts or take a breath sometime because it's coming at you so fast.
Let me ask you real quick, some sort of quick fire questions about Hulk Hogan. We'll get to him a little bit later as well. But
Sure.
Did you know Hulk Hogan before coming to WWE? Were you friends at all, or did you meet him before? Or was that your first meeting, like when you guys started working on those characters?
I knew him not personally, not at all. I knew of him because I was in the business. I knew people that knew him. And the only really thing that really got me into Hulk Hogan was, too, I was like everybody else. That's about the same time that Rocky movie came out. Mm-hmm. I got to play Thunderlips on there, and he did. He was just overwhelming, and it was like, man, this is a big deal. And then shortly after that, I think he kind of defected or moved from the Vern Gagne, Minneapolis territory, and he moved down and he began working for the WWF, and then they swapped the belt with him when he got the Iron Sheik, beat the Iron Sheik in the Garden. So I didn't know Terry before then. I'd heard a lot of things about him. And it was a big deal when I first met him. You know, I mean, and by the way, I'll jump ahead of you a little bit.
Sure.
Always was fantastic to me. Here's the way Terry was. He looked me up and down. He said, "Man," he said, "good." He said, "I'm glad you're here." He said, "I need somebody to help me." In other words, he knew that this business was so hot, and he knew it was so big, and he knew there was going to be so many matches that he needed some other people that he could count on to deliver the mail just besides him. So he was very complimentary to you, because he was looking for guys that could help keep the business strong and could keep drawing people and putting butts in the seats. Mm-hmm. That's what, and he was great to me, always nice.
And did you form a nice friendship with him to this day, or did you have a friendship then, or what was it like? You know what I'm saying? To
this day, now listen, as you well know, a lot of wrestlers we're not real like chummy. Because many of us don't live in the same towns, and wrestlers are kind of like cats. We're scattered all over the countryside, and sometimes if we don't see each other for a year or two or three, nothing to worry about, because when we see each other, we go right back to the same time we saw each other last time. It's kind of like being in some, I guess, some fraternity or being on some team that you know you were on all your life, and you're always going to be a part of the team, and you're always going to be in a fraternity. So he and I still talk when we see each other. As a matter of fact, we'll talk about my book, but he wrote one of the forwards, he and Jimmy Hart, in my book, and he demanded to do it. I asked him if he would do it, and he demanded to do it. And this was the time he was going through all that trial and stuff about that film that they had on him through that tabloid. And he took time from one of his proceedings to give the interview to my guy that wrote the book, and just said wonderful things about me that I didn't realize until after the book was out. I didn't even want to know what he said. But Terry has always been wonderful to me, and during my early brush against him, you can't give somebody enough credit for when they help you when you need to be helped. And he helped me at a time that was very delicate in that wrestling career for me. And I got to say it again, when he willingly and graciously and wonderfully gave me that brush up next against him and gave me his seal of approval, that pretty much put Hillbilly Jim, on the map forever. And I'm always telling him that. And he said, "Oh no, man," he said, "you did." I said, "Look, I know the big deal. I mean, if somebody gives you the seal of approval and the thumbs up, sometimes someone in a high place, that means more to you. You can work hard, but I'd rather be lucky."
Yeah. I'm almost getting emotional hearing about it, because it's sort of like you think about what that would have meant to you, what it meant in the business, what it meant to us kids, what it meant to everybody in the world,
right.
and how popular just to put you on the map like that is really amazing.
Yeah.
It is.
He didn't have to do that. He could have balked against that if he wanted to, but that wasn't his way. He knew there was going to be a lot of this business that needed to be shared, and he knew that there was going to be lots of opportunities in this business coming forward. He knew he was set, but he knew he needed some help on this thing. He needed some more guys that were over. That's some Smarking Out talk. Sure. Over in the business. He needed some guys that the people wanted to come and see, that you could put on a card, and they would draw people to see them. And that's why we could have 3 shows all across the country, because when you got people in your arsenal like you got Roddy Piper, you got Paul Orndorff, you got Big John Studd, King Kong Bundy. You go around, you got you look around at Nikolai Volkov, and you got the Iron Sheik, you got the Mike Rotundo, and you got Barry Windham and those guys. You got guys you got Greg the Hammer Valentine, Tito Santana. You throw your little Hillbilly Jim characters in there, a few of these, a few of that. You've got an arsenal of great matches that can sell out shows, not only just the big ones in the Garden or big ones in LA or Chicago, but in between. You could go to Des Moines, Iowa, you could go to Lincoln, Nebraska, you could go to Louisville, Kentucky, wherever you want to go, and you could have great shows, and we were a part of that. And Hulk Hogan Hulk Hogan was the guy. Now I know they've got all these other guys that came along, and I love Rock, and I love the Stone Cold, and I love John Cena, and they're over, good guys. But let me tell you, you know this, Evan. If you went around and saw that 80s, there was nobody ever over any more than Hulk Hogan, ever.
No, I totally 100% agree. Now, I lived through it, and so some of the discussions sometimes when we talk about our group, and we have thousands of people in our group that discuss this daily. We have 100, maybe 200,000 comments and discussions going on throughout a month, and it's only growing. I grew up with you guys. The next generation grew up with, you've got Shawn Michaels and then Bret Hart, and then you're going into the Rock and Stone Cold stuff. And they may not have lived through what it was like. And nothing wrong with that. You're born whenever you're born. But Hulk Hogan and that whole team did change the world. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. That's just the way it was.
Well, when you're kind of the first at something, you were first. We had first WrestleManias. We had the first pay-per-views. We had the first real merchandising action figures. That's just like I was lucky enough a few years ago to be on the first Legends house with some of these guys. If there's 50 more of them, we were still first.
That's right.
So, that counts for something. That's like the first Super Bowl. And when you are blazing new trails like that, whether or not it's of your own vision or whether or not you were just born in the right decade or lucky, which I like to, I'm kind of a humble guy like that. I know this business is predicated on ego. That's the biggest word in the world. And ego's in all sorts of entertainment business. But, you have to have a certain amount of ego to be able to do stuff and perform before people. And I do too, but not like that. In other words, ego doesn't run my life. And I feel more humble towards having the opportunity to do this. And I brought what I brought to it, and I'm glad forevermore that I did. And I'm appreciative to all the wonderful fans, Evan, that were there for me, and all the great folks. And by the way, I still got great people and fans that follow me today. Like I'm here, and I'm just very honored to be here on the first show for you guys. And it's just a great situation. But I don't want to be one of those guys that say it's I, me. I don't live in yesterday. I only live in now. I don't believe there's no such thing as the future, because when you get to the future, to be now. It's just a now. You hope you got tomorrow or next year, but the only thing that you can't change in your life is your past. You can't change your history. Your history is what it is. And I felt very fortunate and very lucky to have been involved in that business in the time and ideas, because there's a lot of guys that came before me that had hard times, and they kind of a lot of the wrestlers, they kind of resented what we were doing. And I understand that. And I didn't like that. And a lot of the guys that were in the business when I first came in, like Hogan and those guys, they really didn't care for some of the older wrestlers, because a lot of the older wrestlers didn't treat them right. They would do ugly things to them in the ring, try to stretch them, try to hurt them, try to take advantage of them. And we never did this. So consequently, moving forward, when I go into a WWE dressing room now, or I go to a pay-per-view or WrestleMania, those young men and women there couldn't be any more respectful than they are to me. They treat me, it's almost embarrassing how nice they are to me. They come, hey, Mr. Hillbilly Jim. And they're sweet as they can be, because you know why? You think about this. I was never one of those guys that reached over and kicked them in the ribs when they were down. I was never one of those guys that tried to take advantage of them or tried to put them down. So consequently, I ain't going to say anything bad about these guys. I'll tell you what I think. But I'm not going to say anything bad about these guys, because it's like music, Evan. People in the 50s just swear the music in the 50s was the best ever. People in the 60s said you're kind of a person that's subjected forevermore to where you come from and what you did when you grew up. And I'm the same guy too. I have certain things that I like better and think were better, but I don't want to appear bitter. I ain't got to be bitter about it. I just say it this way. It was as good as it ever was in my day. And I was happy to be there. Now, I don't wrestle in today's market, and I don't know what the deal is today, but I'm sure, and I wouldn't want to take anything away from the fans. If the fans want to love it for what they are, that's what they need to do. Find something that you enjoy. And that brings us, to your website here. I mean, you give people a chance to talk, have a little dialogue, and say what they think and express themselves. And really, isn't that what pro wrestling is all about?
Yeah.
I mean, what it should be all about. Pro wrestling, like we always used to say, it should be fun. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was fun for you as a kid. And, and listen, if I didn't feel good, I still tried to go out there every night and dance and do my Hillbilly Jim shtick, because I realized people don't know that I don't feel good that day. All they know is maybe they had a rough day or a rough week, or they just wanted to come to the wrestling match and they want to see Hillbilly Jim get up there and do-si-do and do his thing, throw the big foot up, do whatever I do. And I said, I'm going to give it to him.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way and so I have no regrets. I mean, I had a few injuries that I kind of wish it hadn't happened to me, a neck and a knee, that I wish I hadn't gone through all that. But listen, brother, you can have that if you work at a factory, or if you're just a regular guy that has a regular office job. So my whole deal is, I just want to enjoy the now and sit back and look at what's going on, and I'm just happy to have been a part of something that you and many of your friends that are checking us out on Smarking Out enjoy, and that's great. That's great. What a great thing for me. Hey, yay for me! I won.
Yeah, that's right. One thing, let's just talk about the whole idea of this being real or fake, because you were in, look, when I was a kid, it was like my family had to tell me after watching, like, Evan, that's not real, right? So, but today, it's just, they just say, look, it's sports entertainment. There is no, I think for maybe the last 10, 20 years, it's just been, this is entertainment. When you were wrestling back then, was kayfabe real? Were people thinking this was real? Did you guys know people thought it was real? Was it a fact? Like, give me the difference between being a mark or a smart back then versus today.
Well, let me go back in time a little bit, tell you that the wrestling business always had to kind of feel like, and the wrestlers and the people around the business always had to feel like they had to protect themselves and protect their business. And there was a lot of kayfabe going on, and there was a lot of don't smart with somebody else. It was hard to get into business because they were very selective about who they brought into business. However, when this industry grew to the point to where we're doing pay-per-views, to where we're doing shows every night all around the country, getting ready to start going international. I did a few international tours, Australia, New Zealand, places like that, India, and places like that. But once it started becoming more global and not just regionalized, because it used to just wrestling territories used to be regional, you know. And many of us guys, we have to get in the same airplane and ride, you know, to San Francisco or to San Diego or Sacramento. And sometimes we you stay in the same hotels. There used to be a real thing. The baby faces would stay away from the heels. Baby faces, as all you smart marks know, are the good guys like Hillbilly Jim and Hulk Hogan. Then you had your heels like King Kong Bundy and the Iron Sheik and evil people that were, you know, that they're not supposed to be around each other. And there's a time in these small territories when the wrestling promoters would fine the wrestlers if they saw them talking in public, or they would punish you if they found out that you were riding in the same car together, or that you were fraternizing because you're not protecting the business. Okay, so it gets to the point of what are you going to do about that? And then you throw in all these commissions in every state you go to. They have fight commissions like boxing commissioners and athletic commissioners. So these guys would show up, and they show up at all your shows if you're in Texas or Kentucky, wherever. And these men show up, and some of them are pretty nice guys, and some of them you don't know that. I don't even know if they know how to take your blood pressure. To be honest with you, they're taking your blood pressure. Sometimes you go to odd places, they give you EKGs, and I think it was just there so they could get a pay. You know, they were reaching out for money. So I was already basically done with the business when Vince decided, and they went through that thing with that legalities of being sued by the World Wildlife Federation, right? Mm-hmm. So they had to drop that beautiful WWF, which nobody knew what World Wildlife Federation stood for. They just, if you put that up, they think wrestling. Even to today, they still think wrestling. But anyway, they lost that, so they had to cease and desist doing anything that had anything with WWF on it, okay? So around about that time, I guess that's when the powers that be at the WWE now decided, hey, we'll change everything. We'll just change ourselves. They changed their name to WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment. And when they put that entertainment in there, that got rid of all those commissioners. That got rid of all those boxing and wrestling people that would show up to get paid, you know, the medical people. Because you're kind of like Hollywood now. You're kind of like, glorified stuntmen. So that's what happened on that deal. And that's the way it was. It was a lot harder in the old days to do that kayfabe, and they were real serious about it. As a matter of fact, a lot of the wrestling guys, I mean, they would defend it to a full point, or they'd be punching out people and fighting people. There's a lot of stories about guys getting beat up, you know, and the wrestling fans would, if you got out of line, somebody they'd call themselves defending the business. Nowadays, as you know, if you defend the business, you get a lawsuit. Yeah, right. Punch at your fans because they say, that's phony crap you're doing, Evan. That's horrible, Hillbilly Jim. No, it ain't. And next thing you know, you call yourself defending the business and you knock somebody out, you're in trouble. Yeah. And so it kind of evolved into that because I don't want to kill nobody's concept that there ain't no Santa Claus.
Right.
You know, because wrestling just is what it is. But I'll tell you what. You can, and you do, and people have, and I'm one of them. You can get your bell rung in that ring anytime, and you get clocked all the time. Like I'm saying, and a lot of times I hurt myself worse trying to not hurt somebody else in the ring, you know, because you think about this, if you wrestle 63 straight nights like Hillbilly Jim did one time, me, and you flew 53 of the 63 nights, if you get hurt on one of those days, you're screwed.
That's it.
If you get hurt, that injury ain't going to heal 18 hours to the next night when you got to get out there and go do it again. So we're always pretty careful about trying to protect each other. That's why the guy that you wrestle with, it's an art to it. We call it going out there and dancing. You go out there and dance around with a guy, but you don't want to hurt the guy because that guy's got a family. That guy's got a life, and just like you have. And so you got to protect the guy so you continue on this business. It's not like you can't go out there where it's like a football game where every play is like a car wreck.
Right.
No, because, you know, if you do that, and that's why those pros that play football, they don't practice again until Thursday after a Sunday show. It's Thursday before they can do anything because they feel so bad. They can't move. So the wrestling business has been like that. And the kayfabe, it was very much in play right basically as I was in the business early. But the WWE stopped all that and all the cutting and stuff and gigging and stuff. AIDS came into vogue, so people stopped gigging themselves. And, and actually that turned out for a better product because you can't keep on doing stuff like that. Sometimes it's time for a change. And whether you like it or not, Evan, things move on. Nothing is a helicopter in life. Nothing just sits here and hovers.
Right.
It either goes on or usually it goes backwards. So
that's right. How were guys in the day when it really hit, 1985, 1986, 87, you guys doing the big pay-per-views, WrestleMania? Were you guys getting paid like professional athletes today? Were you making enough money at the time to think that you could do this business and then retire and then move on and be set for life? Or is it a real struggle? Kind of give me the financial side of it just a little bit from those days.
Two things. Grassroots. Those grassroots leagues that we talked about earlier with all these territories, there used to be just like 60 or 70 of them around the country. If you wanted to just go and wrestle in the cold months in Florida or Texas, you could. You could book yourself in there. If you wanted to be in the summertime, you wanted to be up in northern Canada somewhere wrestling. There was territories you could go to. So it was a whole different deal then, and that was kind of a big part of the wrestling lifestyle, kind of a gypsy lifestyle. But as I began getting into the business, it started coming down and getting tighter. And the WWF at that time started buying up all these territories. They buying up all these talent. I mean, you could go and look at a WWF locker room, and there'd be people from Bill Watts' territory. There'd be people from the Carolinas. There was people there from the Grahams in Florida. There'd be people from Vern Gagne's territory. All the other Sandy Barr's territory out in Oregon, or there'd be people from Calgary. So in other words, it become more lucrative to come to the WWF. That's where the big stars. Junkyard Dog came there from being the big dog down in the Louisiana territory for Bill Watts. Everybody did. Roddy Piper came in there from Georgia, and everything was big. So we all started making money, and the money deal was wonderful. We all knew we could make money. Now, before that, guys could make a living at it if you were smart, but most of the guys didn't wind up with any much money because wrestlers and the wrestling business is always frayed and shied away from any kind of union activity. Baseball has union, NBA has union, NFL has union, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it was kind of a thing where you're considered a self-employed person, an independent contractor. So you have to take care of yourself. And usually you got to take care of your insurance and everything. However, everything that happened to me in the WWF, if I ever got hurt, and I did several times, they paid for everything and paid me while I was there. But I had no background. You knew going in that you don't have no backup. You have got to take care of all this yourself. So that's what we did. And they would pay you enough where you have to keep your own receipts, brother, when you go around. We'd carry these little poke bags with us all the time. They're hand because we keep all our receipts because we'd have to take it to our accountants throughout the years. And as you mentioned earlier, a lot of the wrestlers got in trouble. Like you hear about Ricky Flair, and a lot of guys get in trouble with taxes. Because if you forget and don't pay your taxes, woe unto you. That's your responsibility because you don't have nobody doing that for you. So it was something that you need to succeed in this business to kind of have a level head. If you don't, you're going to be those guys that are going to make and generate small fortunes and blow them all and make them again and blow them all. Been many guys have done that. So we had no independent advisors there. They didn't want no agents, nothing like that. Now I understand the guys have agents and they have contracts. I never signed a contract like that. I would get paid, Evan, per show. Wow. I would get every 2-week paycheck would come from the folks in Connecticut, and it would say how much, and it would tell how much I made on the match. If I did a semi-main event in the Garden, it would have the price on there. If I was in a main event with Hulk Hogan, those were the good ones, working the main events. The most money I ever made, I'll just tell you this right now, and the most fun I had, and this is the greatest, is I was involved in this 6-man tag matches, and here's the way it was. It was Andre the Giant, myself, Captain Lou Albano, now check this out, versus Big John Studd, King Kong Bundy, and Bobby the Brain Heenan. Oh, man. We took that all over the country, big places, and it was fantastic. Of course, Studd and Bundy would tee off on me because they knew when Andre came in there, it was over. Because that's what would happen. He would snatch them up just like they were rag dolls. And then, of course, Heenan and Captain Lou would do their things. So, but I would save my money. And there was an opportunity to make more money, too, because of merchandising, which the old guys didn't have it. So, these guys have contracts now. They sign them on contracts. And by the way, bully for these guys that are here now. I give them a hand because they are very nice, these young men and women are, and they come to us and they appreciate us because they realize, whether we wanted to or not, people like myself and Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Jimmy Hart, and all, we kind of paved the way for these guys to get these nice contracts.
Right.
They never signed. Now, the things that Hogan and those guys would do, I don't know what they would get. There was all sorts of things floating around what Hogan would make for a WrestleMania or big pay-per-views. And same thing with Rock coming in. And then there's a lot of heat about Rock coming in sometimes and getting these, and not being with the company, but getting a lot of money for these main event shots. And I understand that. But that's been around for a long, long time. Bottom line is, if you're one of the boys working, it's your obligation and your duty to take care of yourself. You have to make sure you take your money, pay your tax, put your money away. And, some of the wonderful bullet points that came up that they didn't have before me was merchandising. I'd get these, every once in a while you get a beautiful check for these Hillbilly Jim action figures, for these little Hillbilly Jim thumb wrestlers, little Hillbilly Jim game things whatever it was I was on, or if I was on records, or we'd sell records. I've got gold records for albums we did. So those were things that you saved. Now, and it was up to you. Now, I know a lot of guys, and it's sad, and I don't like this because it doesn't make me feel good. They made a lot more money than I did, but I guarantee you I got a lot more money than they did because they blew their money. Yeah. And that, Evan, is a reflection of the entertainment business. It happens with musicians. It happens with actors, and it certainly happens with professional ball players. They're notorious for doing that. It's much better now. These kids have got contracts, and they don't work nearly as many days as we used to. I mean, they get days off. We used to hardly ever get days off. I'm going to tell you, I told you about the time I worked 63 straight nights, and then there was like Ray Hernandez, Hercules Hernandez, God bless his soul. Yeah. He did 100-some nights in a row with her. He never went home. I mean, it's awful. But the business was so hot that's what it entailed that. Right. But it's better now because they got contracts now. Yeah. The bad thing is there's nowhere to break in now in the business. Yeah. I mean, used to be, if you were a young guy, you get your foot and go to one of these smaller territories and you learn what you're doing. As they say, you learn how to work. You'd get the green off of you. Everybody talk about how green you were. And you learn how to work the people, and you learn how to do matches. But now, if you're not a part of the WWE of their training program, the one they have in Louisville, the one they have in Florida, how are you going to get in? There's nowhere to break in. You right. See all these little small shows they do around these towns where guys, but they have a very little chance of ever getting to make it to the WWE. Right. And I think there was one or two more little territories. One thing they used to have down in Nashville, TNA or whatever it was called, but used to be there was a way that you could break in. It's much tougher now to get in. It was tough in my day to get your foot in the door, but it's just difficult now. But money is better now for these guys, and I'm glad for them. They got more guarantees than we ever had. Our guarantee was we ain't got no guarantee, man. You gotta pay your own money. You gotta pay your taxes. You gotta look after yourself, and that was the name of it. And it's working towards a better place for these kids now. And I think a lot of these young men and women that wrestle now, they know that. And they appreciate what we went through for that. So that's the way it ought to be. Things should always move on.
Right. Let me take our first question from the fans here in the group. This one coming from Cornelius Powell. He's from Columbus, Georgia. And he asked, and I think this is a great question, which is about the title picture. You watch WWE now. People don't hold the title like Hulk Hogan did. When I was a kid, it was Hulk Hogan for 3-4 years. Then Randy Savage got it 1 year. Then the title went right back to Hogan. So his question is, did you ever see yourself in the title picture? What was the title picture back then? Or were you just along for the ride?
It was no way. You said that. That's a wonderful point that he brought up there about these titles. And I'll tell you, back in my day when I was there was only going to be just a couple of guys that ever got that WWF World Championship belt. There was only going to be the certain kind of wrestlers were ever going to get the Intercontinental belt. It was going to be guys that could wrestle like Greg the Hammer Valentine or Tito Santana or Macho Man Randy Savage. They put Honky Tonk Man in there sometime. It was never going to be too many changes of those tag team belts. And you know there's going to be somebody like Sheik and Volkov, or it's going to be Demolition, or it's going to be Neidhart and Bret Hart. You know, it was, in other words, it wasn't going to have you get matches with them because we only had 3 belts. Really, if you think about it, they only had the tag belt, they only had the Intercontinental belt, and they only had the world belt. So you weren't, and they only put those in there for guys that would draw money. Now they switch them, just like I see them switching things where I don't think they mean as much as they did before. It's kind of like brushing your tooth with another toothbrush and just getting another. It don't really matter. So I think that's one thing that they kind of maybe dropped the ball on a little bit is they spread them belts around too much. And they make it to where they, in my opinion, now this is just my opinion, it don't seem like they mean as much.
I 100% agree. I think the group probably agrees with that as well. So did you ever think like, oh, I should be the world champion, or it just wasn't that way?
I tell you, no, it wasn't that way, and I never thought that, and I never wanted it. Even if I couldn't, I'll tell you for a while. That's a hard gig. You get that, at that time, if you got that WWF belt, say you got that from Hogan, do you know you're never going to go home, man? You're never going to get a day off. Hey, everything's going to be, the heat's going to be on you. The screws are going to go down on you right away because you're responsible for putting the asses in the seats. Your name is on the marquee. It's Hulk Hogan. It was superstar Billy Graham. It was Bruno Sammartino. You know, it's Macho Man Randy Savage, whoever the hell it was. You know, you have got the heat on you then. I would have rather, and I realized I was more of a character babyface. That's what Hillbilly Jim was. I was a character, like big and animated, and, you know, throw that big punches. And I was the kind of guy that wrestled, but never got too good at wrestling. Wasn't supposed to. I still want to be a good old boy, but then when I got wild up to hell, you better look out. That's kind of the way my Hillbilly Jim character was. Like Coco Beware had Frankie, and he'd do his little thing with him. Like Hacksaw Jim Duggan would do that, whoa, and the 2x4. We all had there was a time when everybody had their own gimmick. And in our day, that's what you did. You didn't do Hulk Hogan's moves. You didn't go in there and drop that big foot. You didn't hulk up like that. You didn't, because that was his thing. Now, the one thing that kind of freaks me out is when the bell rings. When the bell rings, they might have an elaborate bombs and whistles and going into that's all cool. But when the bell rings, it all turns to beige. Everybody's doing the same thing.
Right.
And they're all bing, 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 bing. So, correct me if I'm wrong, fans, but it seems like nothing matters when you do that. I'd rather have guys that go in there and do their style instead of them all looking the same. Now, that's one thing that makes me not want to watch it as much because it's like everybody's got to figure. Because I was told when I first came in, you do Hillbilly Jim stuff. You leave that. We got guys that take these wonderful bumps over here that know how to take these bumps. You don't do this. You don't do the off the top. Well, I didn't want to do it anyway. I don't think I could have, and I didn't want to hurt myself. But anyway, you just do Hillbilly Jim. So I had my character, and I worked my character. I just did my gimmick. And now, lo and behold, many of these guys nowadays are thought they were going to get up to do it. Now they all need hips, knees, shoulders, and everything too. And I understand that's kind of cost of what you do. But I saw a good window where I could just do my thing and maybe get out of it unscathed, except for a neck and a knee.
All right, let's get to some other group questions here. Jesse Lopez of San Antonio says, okay, well, this is a big topic. I don't know why I put this so high up here, but we're going to get right into this one. Right. As much as this is, again, Jesse Lopez of San Antonio, Texas asks, as much as you have committed to both WWF and WWE, is it a little bit odd that you have not been inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame yet? And what are your feelings about that?
Well, I tell you, that was never anything that ever really concerned me. That was nothing that ever really I thought about. Other people, that's for other people to talk about if they want to do it. But since it's been talked about a lot, and I've seen some of the classes and people. And actually, this is just my opinion. I think they got a lot of people in there don't know that shouldn't be in there. I think they got a lot of folks in there that what are they doing there? I mean, why are they there? Not that I'm saying you ought to put me there, but I'm just saying this guy or this person or these people should not be in this, but they are, and it's not for me to say. And here's the way I put about this. And I told you we're going to talk about my book, my Hillbilly Jim book, in a little bit that I got to Gary West did. But I did the epilogue in my book. And I told you what I said in the back of my book. I said to the WWE, to my family, I've instructed my children, if I'm not put into the WWE Hall of Fame before I die, do not accept it. Do not put me in there posthumously. I hate those posthumous inductions because it looks like it's just something to make somebody else feel good. Like, look how great and noble we are for doing that. Listen, what about the poor schmuck that didn't get to live to see his roses or get his accolades? Now, that's just what I'm saying. And I'm not saying that I deserve to be in there because I don't think I do. And I don't think there's a lot of guys that are in there deserve to get. But that's not for me to say, Evan. I don't know. But I don't want to be inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame if I'm not alive to see it. And I've instructed my children in my will to do not accept it. I don't want to go in there. Not that they're going to do it anyway because it's a nice thing. But in a lot of respects, it's been overdone. I think it's stupid for them to have that induction every year, and they're reaching and grabbing for straws. And I'm thinking, but they can do what they want to. But that's just my opinion, and it's still kind of fun for the fans, and I understand. But it seems to me like it's more of just a situation to have another function at WrestleMania where they put people in asses in seats and let them sit up there like they got another attraction at WrestleMania. So that's it.
But let me ask you this. What is just in a few words, what is your relationship right now with the WWE and the guys there? And I assume it's on good terms, but just, what are your terms with the WWE today?
I can actually say, and this is a real smarking out thing, I don't think I've got any heat with anybody. Yeah. And, if you look back in Hillbilly Jim's career, I didn't really have any heat with anybody. Man, I was there for a reason, not just a season. I wanted to get this done and get paid and get out of there and do my thing. And I never was one of those kind of guys that talk behind backs and backstabbed and all that bullshit and to put myself up to put somebody else down. I wasn't that. And so I don't believe I've got any heat anywhere in the office in Connecticut. I know many of the people in there. And over the years and decades, a lot of the folks that I knew forever, I think maybe Howard Finkel was one of the oldest ones up there who's still a dear friend of mine. I got a few people, Sue Aitchison and folks that I know up there, and of course the regular ones. But over the years, about everybody has either went and retired, and sadly, a lot of them like Gorilla Monsoon and so Lord Alfred Hayes and people like that they've passed on. But I still do stuff for them when they call me and ask me to. The last thing I did for them last year is I went down to WrestleMania. Mm-hmm. They usually like to have us down there, and I do autographs at the Fan Access. And by the way, the Fan Access is something that I began many years ago. I was lucky enough that I started out with these mobile tours. I'm even wearing one of those tour things from 21, I think. And I began that many years ago. It was something that we did. We'd take it on the road all the way to WrestleMania, to the week of WrestleMania. And then finally they just figured that it was better if they had it at the actual town they were going to do WrestleMania. It made it for a whole big week deal, and it became a big deal. So I'm very happy that I was the first guy to do that, and I hosted 4 or 5 of those in a row. So I'm still, I think, Evan, in good standings with them up there. But a lot of the things that they call me and might want to ask me to do, I simply don't want to do because I have a life.
Yeah,
listen to me, life. Right. I want to enjoy every day and every moment. And by the way, while you're saying that, and to our fans out there, I like going out and doing these appearances from time to time. And I've turned down 3 or 4 this year, especially because you know why? I don't want to go too often. Because if you go too often, the people see you too much. It doesn't mean anything to you if they see you every year. I like to go just every so often. I've turned down a couple of them for late this year, and maybe one for next year, because I just don't. And sometimes I just want to go and get in the car and drive to Nashville, Tennessee, and get in the plane and fly. Maybe sometimes, unless it's in New York or somewhere, you got to fly through 2 towns. Sure. If I feel like doing it, I'll do it. But a lot of times, if I needed to do it monetarily, I'd go do it. But I look at it now, am I going to enjoy this far more than I am the money that I'm going to make? I'm more interested in, is it going to be fun for me? And I realize if I go too often, the fans see you too much, you become too, you oversaturated. Right. And I said, I'll just maybe I won't do it this year. So, but I do love going out and seeing the fans, and I love hearing their stories. I love talking to them, and sometimes they bring up things to me like you do, Evan, that I hadn't thought about in years. But I think I'm still on good terms with the good folks at the WWE. They're always real nice to me, and it's just like when you go home and you realize your home has changed. Now, when I go to those wrestling shows or when I go to those dressing rooms, it's like I go to my old hometown and I realize my street has changed. The house that I grew up in is not there anymore. And none of the neighbors that I remember are here. That's what it's about. But then again, isn't that life?
Yeah.
Well, that's where I'm at.
Yeah. Who is the best in the business today? I'm not talking about the management and stuff like that, but the wrestlers today. Who do you think is the best in the business today?
You know, you still got some of the guys that are finishing up in there. Some of the guys are now old, like Randy Orton's older and Undertaker's older, and Cena still, of course, has been there forever and never done his thing. I really don't know enough about the younger guys. I think what's really over more than anything is the name WWE, the name, the brand, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series, or whatever it is. I think that supersedes all individuals. Anyone, him or her, whatever they may do, I think the whole sum of the unit is much stronger than one of those particles.
Yeah, it's not like the Hulk Hogan that's you don't have that biggest star in the world. Yeah. Let me get some more questions from the group here. The group asked, this is, I like this from Paul in Scotland. He's actually one of our group administrators, so I've taken his question almost first here. He asked, what is your biggest achievement? When did you think, what do you look back on as your biggest achievement in the business? And when did you look back and say, boy, I've made it?
Wow. You said the gentleman from Scotland, and I think about when I go to those WrestleManias and stuff, I meet people from all over the world that come to those shows, and man, they're so nice. And a lot of people from the British Isles are just so nice to us and so wonderful, and they're just great fans, and they're knowledgeable and know everything, and they just take it for what it is. They enjoy the business, they enjoy the brand, they enjoy going to the shows, and they let their hair down, so to speak, and they get into it. There was several things. It might be a little hokey. When I bought my mother a car and paid for it cash, and she'd never had a new car in her life, and I still got that car today. And I tell you what it was. It was in December of 1986, and it's a 1987 Lincoln Town car. And my mother in her life had never had a new car. And I went down to Nashville, and I'll never forget that. I'll just share this with the fans. I remember when I paid $19,998 for that car. There's no telling what they cost today, but it's a big, nice car. And my mother had never had a new car. And Evan, I said, I'm going to get my mama a new car for Christmas. So I bought that car down there and gave it to my mama. And she was in shock for like a year. It's like, so I said, so that was one thing that made me feel. And then I bought my mother a house before I bought myself a house, or before I bought myself a car, a small little house. And those are two things that let me know that I'd made it. And then the first time that I was able to step into the ring in Madison Square Garden, I had a match against Sergeant Rene Goulet. You know, he wore that Michael Jackson glove. It was a ridiculous gimmick. It was funny. And I looked at ringside, and there was Andy Warhol and Joe Piscopo and Danny DeVito and Billy Martin and these guys. They all in New York at that time. And those were some things that of an old boy from Kentucky. Because I'd heard about fabled Madison Square Garden all my life and seen all those wonderful matches and events and boxing things that they'd had there. And it was like a big deal. That was something that stood in my mind. The other thing was simply being on that WrestleMania 3 card with that almost 94,000 people indoors. That was something, a record that held up for many, 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 many years. We outdrew the Pope. We outdrew the Rolling Stones. We outdrew Elvis. And it was a world record for a lot of years. And those are a few of the hot spots in my career and milestones.
Yeah, fantastic. I want to touch on that because we had another question about that. This one coming from Richie Williams of Cincinnati, Ohio. And he asked, he says he's got your book. I won't let you go before we talk more about the book, and everybody's going to get a chance. But he read the book. He said that WrestleMania 3 was one of the most talked about matches with King Kong Bundy, right, and the Little People. You said it wasn't one of your favorites, never one of your favorites. He asked which match would you say was your favorite, and what match maybe defined Hillbilly Jim. But I think it's sort of a double question. Why wasn't that match one of your favorites, though it's one of the most talked about? And then what was your favorite match, probably?
Well, it was, the scene of WrestleMania 3, the crowd in Pontiac, Michigan, the hype, the world's record crowd that we knew we had, that was the thing that was so encompassing, that overtook everything. And just to be on that card was, something that you could tell generations about, because not very many people got to be on that card, and not very many people you get to talk to ever say they performed before a world's record crowd. So that was really it for me. The match itself, it was just it was a little what we call a gimmick match, because I had the two little guys, he had the two little guys, and me and King Kong Bundy, and then King Kong would go out there and slam one of them, and it sounded like a squeak toy. It was horrible, but it was part of the traveling WWF wrestling show. It was part of what we do. Like, every once in a while they'd bring out Wendy Richter out there, and she'd look all pretty, and then Moolah would beat the hell out of her. It was just, it was and that was just one thing in that whole entertainment thing that I enjoyed doing. But probably some of the things in my life that mean the most to me were wrestling with Andre the Giant and wrestling against Andre the Giant, wrestling people like Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, real experts Harley Race. Those are some of the things that really let you realize that, I'm real proud of that. I'm real proud I got to know some of those guys these guys are the Babe Ruths and the Lou Gehrigts and the Mickey Mantles and the Joe DiMaggio's of wrestling. So I was able, and I was blessed to be able to be, in some situations with those guys.
Let me go to Marcus Barton's question. He's from Pennsylvania. Was Macho Man really that possessive of Miss Elizabeth, like everybody says? And what was it like to work with Macho Man Randy Savage?
Macho Man Randy Savage is a very intense guy. As a matter of fact, I am indirectly responsible for getting him to the WWF, and I'll tell you how that was, because I was in Memphis and wrestled there. I was the first guy that left Memphis and came to the WWF and got the spot at Hillbilly Jim. Shortly after that, we talked, Howard Finkel and I, and a few people, and they said they were interested in Jimmy Hart. I said, well, let's call Jimmy. I called Jimmy and told him somebody was going to be calling from the WWF at that time. He thought it was a joke. He thought that we were riveting. And then Vince finally called him, and then Jimmy goes to the WWF. And when he gets to the WWF, he's the guy who's responsible for pulling Randy Macho Man Savage and Elizabeth's string. He's the one that pulled the string for Ravishing Rick Rude. Mm-hmm. So he had a whole pipeline of stuff he brought in. So that's the way the whole thing with Randy coming in. I've known Randy for years and years, knew his daddy and his brother Lanny, and I still talk from time to time. And his mom at this time of this broadcast, Smarking Out here today, is still living in Florida. And Leaping Lanny Poffo still lives down there. But Macho Man Randy Savage was an intense dude now, man. He was a fired up, kind of guy all the time. But I knew him on a personal level, where I would say that if he relaxed around much of anybody, it was probably around me. But a lot of that stuff with Elizabeth was definitely the truth. But he knew I knew him, and I knew where he come from, and I knew what he was about, and he knew I was not one of those kind of guys. His big deal was he just didn't trust people in the wrestling business, which, wow, that's not a bad thing. I can understand him doing that, but coming from the world that he came from. But Randy was he was an A-type individual, man. He was wired up all the time. That's why he was such a competitor. That's why he was a road warrior. I mean, he'd do those matches. Listen, if he came to your town and you were in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, or you were in Peoria, Illinois, if he was in that ring, brother, he was going to lay it on the line every time. It was the same thing. It wasn't no let up just because he was in Peoria, Illinois. He would give you the same show that he did in Philadelphia. So, miss the guy. I wish he could have lived longer to enjoy his life a little more, and could have enjoyed some of the wonderful accomplishments that he had made and things that he had done. But sometimes, things are just, many of my friends are gone. I mean, a lot of my guys that we talk about, buddies of mine, they're not here anymore, because this business was tough. This business is tough on you, and you've got to decide if you're going to do this business or if this business is going to do you. And I think in a lot of respects, the business does the best. It's the entertainment business we talked about earlier.
Jared Potter in New York says, was there ever a consideration of changing up your character of Hillbilly Jim? Or was it, you were flying so high there was never a chance to even consider that?
There was never a chance on me doing that. There was never a shot of me going to another company and wrestling. I could have went probably down south and did some wrestling down there for that WCW at that time before the WWE bought one. But this is the way I looked at it. This is exactly the way I looked at it. And this is the analogy that I drew. If you're used to riding in a limousine, it's kind of tough to go back and ride in a little Volkswagen with your knees up to your neck. And it's, everything else to me would have been a step down. When I got to this WWF and then morphed into the WWE, I went from being a wrestler to doing TV commentary, to doing managing, to being director of sales for Coliseum Home Video out of New York for WWF and WWE wrestling product. I went through a lot of those phases. I went to doing special events and doing the fan access tours like I did many years and doing things like that for them. I couldn't see myself taking a back step. And I said, I'm just going to finish it out here where I'm at. Whether that means anything to anybody else or to the company, I don't care. That's the way I'm made. I'm not one of those kind of guys that always thinks that there's a better lily pad to jump on. So I started out, when I got to the top, I said, I'm going to stay here as long as I can, and I'm not going to dibble around, and I'm not going to go to these other little companies and do stuff like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, and I'm not going to go somewhere and be – Hillbilly Jim's used to being a baby face. I'm one of the only guys that never changed. I don't flip flop. I never flipped and was a heel one day, then a baby face one day. That wasn't my thing. I said, I think a hillbilly needs to be a good old country boy. And I think a hillbilly needs to be just someone that everyone can relate to. And I said, that's the way I see it, and that's the way I'm going to finish it. And that's what I did.
Was there ever a discussion? In other words, I could see, especially in today's world where so much happens, was there ever a chance? You could see Hillbilly Jim flipping on Hulk Hogan in 2 seconds in today's world.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That would have happened. If you stay around it long enough and you do it long enough, you're eventually going to do the change, the heels, change the gimmicks, change the characters. And I thought this thing that I've been so lucky and fortunate to have done has got over so well, and I'm known for it so well. I'm not going to taint it. And then injuries started happening, but I knew when I began this wrestling business, friends, that one day I'd have to end it. Now, there's nothing no more sad than to hear someone come up to me and say, "How old is so and so? Is he still wrestling? I was a kid when he was wrestling," and I don't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be the guy that stayed too doggone long. Now in the NFL or in Major League Baseball or in the NBA, you don't get that chance. Once you lose a step, you're done. They're out of here. In wrestling, the wonderful wrestling fans are so great and they're so forgiving. You just slow down your gimmick or change a little bit and they'll still accept you, right, even if you don't look good. But I figure you're not helping the business when you're out there looking like crap or you're out there hurting yourself or people say, "Man, he looks awful." Nobody wants to do that. Right. I said, look, I had my time. It wasn't a long time. It was a good time. It's time for me to move on. And that's what I did.
Yeah. I respect that in a sense because sometimes you get these guys stay that are still wrestling and the fans are saying, it's...
How old is this guy? I ain't going to call guys' names. You know all the guys that talk about that. How old is this guy? Well, I remember him when I was a child. I'm going, you know what? That ain't good. And this guy was talking to 65. And he said, I remember when I was, I'm like, you know what?
Let me get through with you. I'm going to name a few names in the business. You just give me your quick reaction to the people. Working with the legendary Junkyard Dog.
JYD was a hoot. I never knew him when he was in New Orleans and in that Bill Watts territory, but they say he owned it. They said he was a big time superstar, but the dog was a character. JY and I got along exceedingly well. He's just another one of those guys that burnt out. He burned his candle at both ends. He was a party kind of guy a little bit, and he enjoyed life a little too much. I wish he was still around because I used to I still have, since you said that, I have vivid memories of Harley Race, who always tormented Junkyard Dog in the dressing room because Junkyard Dog was real touchy. He was real ticklish. And Harley would see JYD in there, and JYD'd have a cup of coffee, and he'd be putting baby oil on, and Harley would do like this, like he's going to come at him and tickle him. and jumped up. No, Harley. He would go crazy. Sweat would pop out on him. He would get in a locker that wasn't no bigger than that, try to get away from Harley racing. Harley would gig him in the ribs, and I miss that. Harley and I used to still talk about that, but I think about Dog like that. Dog was fun to me, man. I always enjoyed Dog. Hell, I wish he was still around. Yeah.
Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff.
Paul Orndorff, one of the best bodies in the business. He gave me a lot of advice. I said, now, Paul, I can't ever get my abs and everything down. He said, you just keep doing what you're doing. You keep eating. He said, it's all about the food. You keep doing it. And just a wonderful guy. Now, Paul was a big star because, he was in the first WrestleManias. He was in there with Mr. T, and he was in there with Hulk Hogan. And of course, they had Roddy was in there. And I think Cowboy Orton was in there.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a big time star and a great guy to me. And I told him one time, I said, Paul, I remember when I first came in, you were about as over as anybody as a heel in the WWF. And I said, you were always so good to me, nice to me. And he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to be that way, but he just was that kind of guy to me. And I see him today. He's getting a little age, and of course he had some injuries and stuff, but it still does me good to see Paul. That's one reason I like going to these autograph shows that I go to, because I see some guys sometimes I haven't saw in a few years. And that's really our only way of communicating, since we're not all real chummy,
Sure.
But love Paul Orndorff.
Those two came from Bob Travis of Almont, Michigan. Joseph Troncoza of Visalia, California wants to know about Big John Studd and King Kong Bundy.
Both of them. Big John Studd. John was first time I saw John Studd in Nashville, Tennessee. He made me turn around and let's get ass to ass so we could see who was the tallest. We got butt to butt and tall at that time, and that was right before the Hillbilly Jim thing started, because because that's the first match I worked for him. I went and did a little preliminary match in Nashville, Tennessee, and the next night I went to Memphis, and a month or two later I went to Connecticut, and we started the Hillbilly Jim thing. So John was always good to me, but now John, he was into that Giants thing, and him and Andre used to have a whole lot of. Andre liked him, but Andre didn't like nobody calling themselves a Giant. So as much as Andre could, he brutalized John in the matches. If you ever seen the matches, he brutalized him. And John and I would talk about that from time to time. I have one regret, and if I could, I'm going to tell your fans, about 2 weeks before he passed, he would call me, and I'd always call him back, and I'm usually pretty punctual on calling back. But we were talking about something a time or two before he called him, and he called me about 2 weeks, and I said, I'll get back with him. I never got back with him. He died. And I kind of, even to this day, it bothers me because he had some sort of disease like Hodgkin's or something, some sort of a cancer or something. And that bothers me even to this day. So God bless John, Big John Studd, John Menton. He was a good guy, and I liked him a lot. And then the other guy you were asking me about is King Kong Bundy, Big Chris.
Yeah.
I have kind of, he's a character now. He just was saying, I guarantee you to this day, whatever the hell is on his mind, he don't care who's there, if it's good, if it's bad, if it's indifferent. He has no filter. No filter like Mr. Coffee. He has no filter. And we kind of rejoined at about 3 years ago at one of these trade shows I saw him. I made him give me my number. I gave him, and we talked for a while. And now we ain't talked in a long time, but he's a character. I always enjoy him. He won't go to too many of these shows and do stuff, even though people want him, because he will not fly. He will not go to the airport. Everywhere he goes, he wants to drive. So I think about him because he was instrumental in my life. Because if you think about that, before WrestleMania 2, I went all around the country and the world wrestling him, setting him up for the Hulk Hogan match when they had the big cage match in LA at WrestleMania 2, because I was at WrestleMania 2 in the NFL versus WWF guys in Chicago. So I had to go around and work with Bundy every night, setting him up for Hogan. And he brutalized me too, Chris. If you're listening, you know you brutalized me. Anyway, it's a big dumb hillbilly. I said, you got that right, but I said I'm a kind hillbilly. But Chris was a good friend of mine, and he's one of the true characters of that business. Believe me.
Yeah.
See why they haven't got him in the WWE Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Now why not? Why? Speaking of guys not in the Hall of Fame, why is Bundy not in the Hall of Fame? Yeah. Not Hillbilly Jim. Why is King Kong Bundy not in the Hall of Fame? Now, do the math on that.
Yeah, I'm just saying, WrestleMania 2, it was like when you set up the biggest match of the year and it's Hogan versus Bundy. It really was. I mean, it was Bundy against Hogan was,
I'll tell you what, for his size, he was about a 400-some pound guy, but you had big, huge legs. He had the fastest step or two across that ring of anybody. I'm telling you, I believe the damn guy, if you got him in a little bit better shape, he could probably play the line on some football team because his first step or two were fast as anybody's. Another guy I enjoyed working with was 747, the one-man gang. You remember him?
Of course, yeah.
Akeem, the Dream. He had all the games. A big George Gray from down in Louisiana who worked many years he was a prison guard for many years. Can you imagine having that guy as your prison guard? You're in prison. Made me say, I'd be thinking, man, I got to get out of this prison. I got to go straight. Look at these guards you're making in here.
Yeah, that guy was he was huge. He was awesome. Devin Keith Alexander of Fresno, California asks, did you like doing the Legends House, and would you do it again?
I love doing the Legends House. If you'll notice, anybody that sees it, I was one of the guys that appeared to be having a good time while he was doing it, because I'm going to tell you something. I was having a good time because I realized, look, I'll never get to do this again. I'm the first one to do it. And let's go back to my friend in Fresno. When we first got there, everybody in that house, except me, was in the Hall of Fame. And all the boys were saying, Hillbilly, why aren't you in the Hall of Fame? I'm not in the Hall of Fame. And they were saying, Howard Finkel's in there, Pat Patterson, Gene Okerlund, Jimmy Hart, Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Tony Addis is in there, Roddy Piper's. They said, why aren't you? I said, guys, listen. And the only way I can say to them, I said, look, I thank you for saying it, but that don't bother me because I've had a Hall of Fame life. I said, if things were too bad, how come they put me in here with all of y'all? We had a wonderful time there. I enjoyed doing every minute of it because I told all the guys, and all the guys were uptight because, it was just something that we never did. And I told them, I said, look, we all know each other. We've known each other for years, but heck, we don't know each other. We never spent any quality time with each other. It's just like I see you at the TV taping, I see you at the pay-per-view, I see you at the big show, and then we go home and we do this forever. But we never when you spend 3.5 weeks having with somebody, you get to know them.
That's right, 24/7. Yeah.
So that was a good thing. And like I said, boys, we thought there was going to be more legend houses, but so far there's not been any more. And I said, well, it don't matter because if there's never any more, at least we were the first ones to do it. And like I say, you can't beat first. First is first. So.
Absolutely. Cornelius Powell, again, we talked about a lot about how it was work with Hulk Hogan. And I think we covered that, how great he was to work with at the time. Are you friendly with him today? And what do you think about everything going on with him? And it has changed here is a guy that was our superstar of all our life that really had this mix of bad news. It's sort of it has shaded his maybe legacy, I guess you would say. So what do you think about all that?
I still talk with Terry, not very often. We've never been super really chummy. Jimmy Hart talks to him all the time because he lives in Florida, and I talk to Jimmy quite a bit. He's the one I probably talk to most. Also, I want to give a shout out to in White Bear Lake, Minnesota, to Jumping Jim Brunzell. He's one of my dear friends and one of the great wrestlers, one of the ones with the Killer Bees for many years.
Sure.
And of course, the late Bobby Heenan was a dear friend of mine. I've got George the Animal Steel, just a few guys that I used to keep up with quite a bit that I don't anymore. I still talk to Lanny Poffo in Florida, Greg Valentine from time to time. But talking about Hogan, it never does me any good. And it does not make me happy, and it does not make me feel better about myself or feel like it elevates me when I see someone has a hard time or something. And Hogan has always been wonderful to me, just a first-class man. I liked his first wife. I didn't get to know his children, but I remember Linda when they were there because he was there February 25th, 1985 when I had that big knee injury in San Diego, California at the sports arena because I was in a match with Hogan. Me and Hogan were working Beefcake and Johnny Valiant. When I see these things that happen, I think I'm just going to shoot straight with it. It's just my opinion. I think the downfall of this whole thing that started making Terry and his family have all these hard times was when he did that Hogan's Knows Best. I've noticed that many of those people that do those reality shows, it puts them in a weird, strange space that I don't understand. And just having everybody around and being around you and doing too much, I always felt that Hulk Hogan, let's just face it, was like Babe Ruth. He was like Michael Jordan. He was our, now for me, and this is just me, now that's not the way he's made because he's wired differently. If he had taken his Hulk Hogan celebrity and went to Florida and went home and opened up a chain of Hulk Hogan's pizzerias, and Hulk Hogan bowling alleys, and Hulk Hogan's steak and shake places, he would have been fabulously wealthy and his family would have probably been together. But you know, this lure of show business, and we all have the biggest word in the universe, and it's ego. It's the biggest word in the universe. I think that can cause a lot of problems. And I understand that you can't put milk back in the container after it's spilt. But I think if he would have done that, he would probably have. But that's just my opinion. But it troubled me. It saddened me. And it made me feel bad to see him going through all these things that he went through, personal things, all these horrible things that the man. But to his credit, he stood up under and weathered them. I hated that awful thing with his son, Nick, and that young soldier that had that accident. And then all the ramifications that came down behind that. It was something that did not please me. And I've often felt like, I thought this and I said, I wish Hogan had some, I know he's got friends, but you wonder how many real friends do you have? How many friends you got that are not just there because you're who you are and you're going to pick up the check? I think if he'd had some more real friends, like I've got friends I've had for 45 years. We've never had a crossword. We've never had a problem. And I think there's a time in your life, friends, it don't matter if you're a celebrity or not a celebrity. You got to have good people around you that like you, not what they perceive you are. So I wish many of the guys in the business of life could turn out a lot better. I don't like to hear about these tragedies and these awful things that befall people like my buddy Ric Flair and people like that. But, you know, sometimes it is what it is. And to be honest with you, I learned from that. Listen, I don't want to be that guy. How much do you need to be good? How much do you have to soothe your need to be the man or the ego or the money? And then, you know, it's never going to change because as long as the world's been going around, there's been celebrities and important people that have done that all over the world. And, you know, from great boxers and baseball players and football players and actors. And we hear all the awful stuff that's going on in Hollywood now, you know, with these people and all these abuse charges that are coming up. But in my world, Hogan was great to me. He's always been wonderful. He's a friend of mine. And if there's ever anything I can do for him, because Hulk Hogan and the WWE, the WWF, they did a lot for me that no one else can do. They took an old boy from down here in Kentucky that didn't have a whole lot of anything, and they made it possible, in my opinion, for me to have a whole lot of everything. And what am I going to complain about? I ain't got no complaints. I'm just glad to be here, along for the ride. You know, somebody needs me to pick them up at the airport, just call me. I'll be the taxi for it. I don't care. I just my whole deal is I simply want to enjoy the day. And like I say, every Sirius XM radio show that I close, I ain't here for a long time. I'm here for a good time. I just want to enjoy every day. And I want to get out of here as painlessly evident as I can.
Boy, one of the things I just want to say real quick, which is, you know, this is our inaugural episode of this web series. And I just wanted to connect fans and my passion for this. And I'm not doing this for money. And there's nobody paying me for this. Nobody's getting paid here. We're doing it because we love it. And I just appreciate your honesty and our conversation before this and just how much I've enjoyed just the way, your humbleness about it all. Yet, you know, when you first called, I was like, we're blown away by it for you. You know, it's your life. But I just can't thank you enough for doing this for me and giving me this rub, if you will, and how this just helps me and help our fan group. And we can't thank you enough for that. I speak on behalf of everybody. If there's anything we can do, and I do want to talk about your book, and because I can't wait to get it. And we've got a special thing set up where not only are we going to let people buy the book, which is not expensive at all, but I think you've agreed that you'll autograph the book, the ones that they buy through our link. So maybe show the book. Let's talk about it and tell everybody what we're going to do.
Listen, let me say one thing to you, Evan. When my buddy Kenny Lee contacted me about you reaching out to try to find me, you know, I'm not a tech guy. I get my email delivered by phone, and Kenny delivers it to me. He says, "Hillbilly, here's your email by phone delivery." Because I'm not a computer guy. You know, I got a website, but I let somebody else handle it. I'm just not that kind of guy. I'm just from that world. It just wasn't my deal. But I said, "Give me Evan's phone number and let us talk." And as soon as I talked to you, I was with it because I get you, man. You're a wonderful guy. And to those of you that are checking this out, he's a straight up guy. I have a real good way about piecing through people to find out if the guy's full of it or if he's not. And this is a good man here. So I absolutely agreed to come and do it with you. And I hope that this wonderful program grows and progresses. I love the name of it, Smarking Out. It's great. And for all you wrestling fans out there, for me to get a chance to talk to you, just thank you for being great to me all these years. And I hope you continue to enjoy watching wrestling business. And it is what it is. The wrestling business is whatever you want it to be. It's your own illusion for you to think of it and to enjoy and to account for and discount for anything you want to. That's what it's all out there for. We're laying it out there for your enjoyment. And I appreciate you for taking care of me. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about this book. I've got a new book that's just came out last year. I'll show a little picture of here if we can get it on here where everybody can see it good. I think that looks pretty good. Actually, it's a very nice book. I'm happy with it. It's called Hillbilly Jim, The Incredible Story of a Wrestling Superstar. It's wrote by Gary P. West, who is a great book writer. And he said this was going to be the last book he ever was going to do. He did books on the old American Basketball League, ABA, the Kentucky Colonels. He's did books on several different things, lots of cookbooks and things. And he's a very accepted writer. And they've had him in a lot of the Courier Journal in Louisville. He writes for them and does things. And the forward on this book is done by Hulk Hogan and Jimmy Hart. I've got two forwards. And many of these photographs in this book are my own personal collection. I happen to be, Evan, one of those guys that brought cameras with him when I wrestled. Most of the guys, I ain't doing that. I happen to have carried a little camera with me, and I've got a couple of hundred of the 400 or 500 pictures that I submitted to him that nobody's ever seen before. That are my own personal ones in here. There's ones in here with me and Ric Flair and people like that, and early Vince McMahon and things like that, and some family shots, and it's about my life. When Gary West approached me about writing this book, I said, "You want to do what on me?" But he impressed that he wanted to do it. So I'm real happy with the book. Everybody seems to enjoy it. It's done by Acclaim Press out of Missouri. It's a beautiful book. It's got a hardcore, beautiful cover to it. And then the good thing about it is if the cover goes bad, it's still the same book on the inside. So it's going to last forever here for you. And I told Gary when we did this book, I said, the only thing I want to do, I don't want to put anything here that's not true. I don't want you to embellish anything. I don't want to make it look like I'm the best thing since sliced bread and butter, because I'm not. I said I want to be truthful. I want to say what's on my mind. And I wrote the epilogue in here. I read it to you one day, Evan, I think, at the end of it. So if someone wants me to sign this and autograph it, to personalize it to you or anyone, or if you want something you want me to say.
Actually, I've been talking to Gary and his wife, I believe his wife, Deborah. I've been talking to them. What we're going to do is we're going to have this set up on our website. All you guys have to do is go to smarkingout.com. This episode, which is the episode number 1 with Mr. Hillbilly Jim here. And then we'll have a direct button. That button will allow people to not only purchase it, they can put in, they'll put their note, and then Hillbilly Jim is going to sign the books that want, and he'll send it out to you. So it's going to be great.
Picture of me and Vince, but man, there's a picture of me and my mom. There's one with me and the late Ultimate Warrior. There's me and one wrestling John Studd and me and Brian, just to name a few. There's so many of these are my own that I took with my own little camera. I would just say, look, come here, let me take a picture with you. And a lot of the guys in the wrestling business wouldn't want to do it because they were saying, no, I'm not going to do that. There's one that I love, me and Charlie Daniels right here. And right here is Roddy Piper.
Oh my gosh.
Chris Nowinski, he's the guy that's a big deal with the NFL about this brain thing at Boston College. Remember, he used to wrestle for us. Sure. And I've got some pictures in here that are my own collection. And, I submitted a lot of them to Gary. You can't put but so many. We put about 200 some in here.
Yeah.
Because it goes well if you could put the faces with the names. And I'm just real happy that but if you want me to sign this, and we got Christmas coming on here, guys, before the holidays, if you'll just forward this through Evan here and forward this to Gary West, and they'll handle everything and they'll sign. I can go over to his place because we live luckily in the same hometown here. I'll go over to his place. If you want one for Christmas, and if you really want to stuff that stocking hard with Hillbilly gear,
Yeah, we're going to get it all set up. It's going to be very easy on the website, guys. So we're going to have and every time we're going to have this on YouTube, we're going to have this on our Facebook page, we're going to have this on smarkingout.com. But all of that will lead back to this link. So I know a lot of people are already going to want to buy it. I'm going to buy it, of course, and everybody wants that autograph. That's exciting. And I want to ask one final thing, which, sometimes I hear you go into the character again. You go back into that Hillbilly Jim talk. And is that something you lived? Is that something that is just fun for you? Do you feel like you're always on, or is that just for the camera? What do you feel about that? Is that character now a part of you?
Well, it is part of me. Many people now, my name is Jim Morris, okay? But many people just, even amongst the hillbilly, it's hillbilly. And I love it. I think it's the greatest thing ever that people will remember me, as long as they can remember you, Evan, in my opinion, for something positive. Now, I have been around people that were celebrities that I'll have to say this about this guy, and I remember this guy. I'll tell you this real quick. You remember George Lindsay, the guy who used to play Goober?
Yeah.
On many people that might remember the Andy Griffith Show. Goober, he was the service station attendant. Hi, Andy, I did some episodes of that little country show called Hee Haw years ago, which was a syndicated kind of like a Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, but it was a country thing. And I got on set down there in Nashville one time, and I saw George Lindsay, and I went up to him and I shook him. I said, "Goober, nice to meet you." And he said, "Jim, no." He said, "It's just George." He didn't want to be known as Goober Powell. But I'm thinking, hell, the only thing anybody knows you at that you're ever going to do in your life is Goober Powell. And as it's turned out, God bless his soul, he's gone. That's the only thing they ever remember him. Now listen, if someone remembers me for being Hillbilly Jim, that's good, because I don't think, unless I get another lifetime that I don't think I'm going to get, I'll ever do anything to surpass that Hillbilly Jim thing, because I can't put myself on national television. I can't do a national campaign and sell gear of myself. I can't make myself a household item. That business did. You think I'm not happy if somebody called me Hillbilly? I love it. I love it. So, yeah, and I can channel the hillbilly. Hey, what's going on here? I can tell all the jokes, do whatever I take, because it's not a hard stretch for me. And I'm glad I got a gimmick that was easy to do, and something that I didn't have to go home and fret over, or something that you have to. Some guys have these hard, complicated gimmicks where it's hard to get away from, especially the guys that are the bad guys, the heels. There's stories of people having problems in their own town and their own home, and I never had that. My deal was everybody reached out to me, and so it wasn't very much pushing back. So, and by the way, hope everybody has a great Christmas and a wonderful New Year's, and just take care of yourselves. And if you see I'm out somewhere, come and hang out. And if you get the book, I hope you enjoy it. Just remember, like Brother's going to tell you, if you want it before the holidays, make sure you call. You do all the things, and if you got anything you want personalized. To anybody, whoever it may be, something specially said, I'll do it myself on my own. I'm not one of those kind of guys that wants to get somebody else to do my own stuff. I like to do my own things. I like signing those autographs. That's a lot of fun.
Sure. Yeah.
I enjoy doing those. So thank you. Thank you, Evan. Thank you.
Oh, man, I can't thank you enough. It's just a dream come true, really, and I can't thank you enough. This is the kind of work I always wanted to do when it came to media, and I just want to talk to people and get their stories. And
thank you, and I think you already know it because you're part of it. I'll just say this. Yeah. We've always known the wrestling fans are the best fans out there. They're the most loyal. They're the most they're the most forgiving. Yeah. They're the most they're the most vocal ones. And if they like you, they always like you. And that's one thing that I have experienced the life of. And so I could spend an hour or two just thank you, folks. Thanks for remembering me, man. It's good. And keep enjoying wrestling and keep it with a perspective of what it is, and enjoy every moment of it. And don't let nobody tell you it ain't whatever it is. It is whatever you want it to be. Enjoy.